afternoon. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein. This is Valley Beth Shalom live and online. It's Tuesday afternoon and it's story time. Now you'll notice behind me is a very famous piece of art. This is a painting by the very famous artist Vincent van Gogh. It's called Starry, Starry Night. Very, very famous painting. People come from all over the world to see this painting. It's very, very beautiful painting. Van Gogh made a lot of very beautiful paintings. So I thought today I would tell you a story about art, about an artist, and about what it means to make a masterpiece, the most wonderful piece of art an artist could make. Once upon a time, there was a king who built a beautiful new palace. Every room in the palace was magnificent, and every room was decorated so beautifully with paintings and with artwork and with statues. It was just gorgeous. Except one room. There was this one room. It was long and narrow and had high walls on each side. And nobody could figure out how to decorate that room. No painter, no artist, no designer, no architect. No one could figure out how to design that room. And then someone gave the king a wonderful idea. Why don't we have a contest? We'll choose two of the greatest artists in the kingdom, give them a great reward, and let them see who creates the best piece of art for one wall. And so it was, they had a big, big contest. And out of all the artists in the kingdom, they chose the two most talented. The king brought them into the room, and the two men looked up at the walls. They were so high and they were so long, and it was so much to decorate. The king said, "You are each a master. So I challenge you to create a masterpiece, a great piece of art. And after a year, I will judge. And whosever piece of art is greater will receive a reward more than he could possibly imagine. You can live here in the palace, eat at my table. All the assistants and paints and equipment you need is yours. Create a masterpiece." Two artists accepted the challenge. They moved into the palace and they began to work right away. Well, not exactly. One of them did. One of the artists came in each day and he began to sketch and he began to draw and he began to imagine and to think and to dream about what he could put up on that huge wall. The other artist only came in every morning, looked up at the wall, shook his head, and he left. At the end of a month, the first artist had a pretty good idea what he wanted to do. He started hiring assistants to help him and started buying equipment and paint. They started erecting a great scaffold, great frame around the wall so they could reach all the parts of the wall. And when the scaffold was up, the artist began to whitewash the wall and get it ready for the paint. The second artist just came in every day, sat looking up for a few minutes at the wall, shook his head, and he left. By the third month, the artist had begun to put his designs up on the wall. He began to see how the wall would bear his design, what it would look like. His assistants were busy mixing the paints and preparing the colors for the wall. And the other wall was just blank. 4 months went by, and 5 months, and 6 months. It was halfway through the year. By now, the first artist's design was really taking shape. You could see how he had thought about this beautiful design for the wall, and how the colors and the textures of the paint, how the organization of the figures and the design really made something magnificent. 6 months he had worked every single day and late into the night, sketching and preparing, directing his assistants, painting and painting. And the other wall was just as blank as it had been on day one. And each day that artist came in and just looked up at that wall, shook his head, and he left. 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, 11 months. By the end of the year, by the 12th month, the artist on the first wall was almost finished. He and his assistants had worked so hard. The design was magnificent. The colors were breathtaking. The images were profound. It was such a beautiful and remarkable piece of art. And on the last week, they finished the piece. They took down the scaffolding. And on the last night of the last week, of the last month of the whole year they had worked, the artist, well, he gathered in all of his assistants and said, "My friends, help me now. You have all participated in creating this masterpiece. It belongs to you all." And he handed each and every one of the assistants a brush and said, "Sign your name." And each one signed his name. And then when all of them had finished signing their names, the artist himself signed his name in big letters. And they turned around and they looked, and their hearts were so glad because the work of the year was wonderful. It was beautiful. It was stirring and inspiring. They said, "We have done good work, my friends. Thank you." And they left. And as they left, the only one left in the room was the artist of the second wall. And that wall was blank, just as empty, just as big and vast, but just as blank as it had been on the very first day when the two artists accepted the king's challenge. Well, the next day, the two artists came at once to the palace, and the king met them in the room outside, the anteroom, and said, "I want you to wait here. I want to go inside and see what you've created." The two artists waited outside nervously, and the king walked into the room. And he turned and he looked up at the piece of art created by the first artist, and his breath was taken away. It was magnificent. It was so beautiful, so colorful, so profound. It made him feel amazing. I have had something to do with creating a piece of art this magnificent. Thank you, God, for the gifts of this artist. And thank you, God, that I was able to help him and his assistants and his crew create such a beautiful masterpiece, a work of art that will go down in the generations as one of the greatest pieces of art in the entire world. And then he turned around and he looked on the other wall and he was amazed by what he saw. Do you know what he saw on the other wall? Do you know what was there on the other wall? Do you know what filled the other wall? The exact same painting. Exactly the same. Line for line, brush stroke for brush stroke, design for design, figure for figure. It was the exact same painting on the other wall, with one exception. That there on the wall, staring back at him, was a king who looked just like him. So the king, he walked up to the wall and he put out his hand and he touched it. And sure enough, it was cool and smooth like glass. What had the artist done? He put up mirrors. The whole wall was covered with mirrors. Mirrors from top to bottom, mirrors from side to side. So whatever was on the one wall was reflected on the other wall. Mirrors. A perfect image of what was on the other wall. Well, the king called the two artists back into the room. And the king said, "Well, I've looked very carefully at the two pieces of art, the two paintings, this wall and this wall. And as far as I can see, it seems to me to be the same. It's the same. everything that's on this wall is also on that wall. And everything that's on that wall is also on this wall. So the only fair thing to do is to declare this contest a tie. You are both tied. And because you're both tied, the reward will go to the person who deserves it. It's a tie. It will be split. It will be divided equally between the two. And the artist who had created the magnificent masterpiece on the one wall, he said, but your majesty, but your majesty, look what he did. Look what he did. He stole my work. I painted this, and my assistants, we worked for a year, and look what he did. He put up mirrors. He stole my work. I won't hear of it, said the king. The contest is a tie. Each of you will get the reward you deserve. Go home. Come back tomorrow morning, same time. I'll have your reward ready for you. The two artists went home. The one artist who created the masterpiece was so upset his heart was broken. How would you feel? And the other artist, he got away with it. That's what he felt. Let's stop for just a minute before we conclude the story because it's such a good story. Why do you suppose he put up mirrors? What does it mean to put up a mirror? It means that instead of creating something myself, instead of being the person I want most to be, I copy somebody else. A mirror is, after all, just a copy. Instead of being the person I most want to be, I just copy. Why did he just copy? Well, you could say that he didn't feel like working very hard. He was kind of lazy. There's a big word for this. It's called procrastination. Ever hear this word? It means putting off tomorrow what you should have done today. You ever do this at home? Put off till tomorrow what you should have done. All of us do this. He waited. He was comfortable living in the palace. He liked eating the king's food. He liked sleeping in a comfortable bed. He liked living in the palace. And so he put it off today and tomorrow and the day after. He put it off. He put it off. He put it off. And then after a whole year went by, he realized, now I have to create something. Procrastination never leads to something good. That could be one reason. What could be another reason? Why do people copy other people instead of doing the things that reflect on who they really are? Maybe he was afraid. What could he be afraid of? Well, a painter paints a beautiful painting. What if people don't like it? What if they say mean things about it? How am I going to feel? Just by the way, the guy who painted this one of the most beautiful paintings ever created in the world, never sold any paintings. No one ever wanted to buy his paintings. They thought they were kind of weird and strange. What if you felt that your work would not be loved, but instead would be made fun of? So instead of putting out your best, you just copy what somebody else does. People do that sometimes. Isn't that a terrible thing? Isn't it terrible to be afraid to be who you really are and to create what you're capable of creating because you're afraid someone might say something mean? It's a terrible thing. But it's important to know what happens next, the reward. Well, the next day, the two artists came to the palace just as the king instructed. And the king said, come with me into the room. And they walked into the room. And there on one side was the beautiful, magnificent masterpiece. And there on the other side was the mirrors. And the artist who created the masterpiece felt so sad. He could barely look up at the king and barely look into his eyes. And the artist who created the mirrors just smirked and smiled. He got away. He got away with it. The king could see his feelings. The feelings of the two artists. So the king walked up to the first artist, put his hand on his shoulder and said, my friend, you have created something truly magnificent. You have created a piece of art so inspiring, so beautiful. You have made this palace a place that will be known for eternity as the home of this magnificent piece. You have created something as beautiful as God could ever want to imagine, and I am so grateful. For this, you will be rewarded. Here, this pile of gold is yours. It was more gold than the artist had ever seen in his life, more gold than anyone had ever seen in their life. The king said, I know it's a lot. Take this gold and teach. Teach others to create the art that you have made. Take this gold and go out and create more masterpieces. Take this art, this gold, and go out and be the artist you've always wanted to be. For the rest of your life, you will never have to worry about money. You will never have to worry that you have enough. I will pay for anything. I am so thankful, so grateful, so appreciative of what you have created. This is a small reward for a great effort, for a great piece of work, for a masterpiece. Thank you. And by this, the other artist was getting impatient. He said, wait a minute, Your Majesty, wait. You said it would be equal. You said we would both get what was coming to us. Oh, yes, said the king. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You are getting what is coming to you. And the king went over to that artist and he put his arm around his shoulder and said, my dear friend, you've created something very important as well. And here is your reward. Look, there, in the mirror, the pile of gold. That is your payment for what you have created. That's it. Only the image, not the reality. That's it. That's all you get for what you did. When we put ourselves in the world and create something beautiful, sometimes we get rewarded as the king rewards us, but often it's just with a sense that we've done something wonderful. We feel it inside, and that's worth everything. But if we fake it, if we copy, if we steal what someone else is, if we don't create from our own hearts, the reward never comes to us. It's only a ghost, only an illusion. That's one of the great truths of being alive. I hope you enjoy this beautiful piece. I certainly do. And I hope you enjoy this beautiful evening tonight. Take good care. Take care of your family and your friends. We'll see you next week.